wanted to reply to the debate for about 10 minutes.
Other question, the last comment point. The SWP doesn't mean there's a parliamentary vote of socialism. Doesn't mean to say we don't stand in Parliament or don't stand for council seats. I mean, that's just crazy. It's a tactic in order to win. I mean, I'm sure we all agree on this. It's a tactic to win wider support amongst people. I stand in the position of Lenin, who said, you know, Parliament's a pile of shit. Sometimes you have to stand in it to get attention, but you never kiss it. And that seems to me to be the way we should run our affairs. I don't think it's a contradiction in the two things. I'm sure we both agree on that. Look, and secondly on the question is, look, I've had many fallouts with George Galloway on it. The point I was trying to make is, do I regret, for 1 minute, us standing there for Green winning? No, I don't. Because I'll tell you what, for all of us, whether you agree with the Respect project or not, it was important to show that you can beat your neighbour in a first-past-the-post system and beat them fair and square, and that's a step forward. Now, has it gone wrong? Yeah, but you know, the truth of it is, it's important for all of us to try and win and break through. And you know, I welcome it with David Dennis, I welcome it with other people. I think it's, you know, it's very important we don't take a sectarian attitude to the left winning seats anywhere. And I take that from my own organisation as well. I absolutely, if we don't break down the barriers, if we don't start to win, you can't really put forward alternatives. So it seems to me that's that. On the question of George Galloway and abortion and gay rights, I know his personal view on these matters are. The question is, when he was in Respect, or when he was in Respect still, did he vote against abortion? No, he didn't. He absolutely accepted the policy of Respect. He made that point at Respect conference time and time again. I don't think you can ask anything more of anyone than that if they don't agree with Frank, to still carry on and carry out the policy of the organisation. That's what he did do. That's a matter of fact and record. Quickly come back on Lois's point. Look, you know, the idea that the RMT and the FPU would still be the Labour Party if, you know, if the SNP get its way is just totally unfair. I mean, at the RMT conference, just for the record, I don't think there was any Socialist Party member at the RMT conference that voted to break from it. I was at that conference, right? And our three comrades, one seconded the motion and two others spoke in. Their names were Gunjan Mirza, David King from Scotland, and Linda Aiken on the tubes. That's our record on that. And inside the FPU, anyway, if you've got comments in the FPU in this room, I think you would guarantee that Neil Williams spoke absolutely on the question of breaking there. So I don't think that's fair, and I don't believe that's right at all. Right then, let me just come back to the comment from the DWP. I don't agree with your position, but I just want to make one thing absolutely crystal clear from this meeting, which is I never said it was a disgrace or a sellout. I've looked back at my notes and I'm absolutely adamant I never said that. I said I was disappointed. I want to say that because I do think there's a difference. I mean, there's a difference in saying you're disappointed about something, accusing people of being sellouts and disgraces. I don't believe the comrades who voted for it are disgraces or sellouts. I'd like to make that absolutely clear to this meeting, repeat that one more time, so that's absolutely clear. But I am disappointed because I believe we were heading for next week the possibility of 500,000 workers coming out on strike as a united front against this government's pay freeze, and I think it's a tragedy that we do not have action next week, both the NUT and the PCS. And the danger, I think, in this situation are that Unison called, you know, I was gutted with Unison. To see them at TUC conference, move second in the motion, then pulling their action, then the NUT pulling its action, then the PCS pulling its action. The danger of this is the right begins to pull the left, and we've got to start pulling the other way around. So that's where I stand on that. Then on Lois's point, yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure there's much difference between delighted and we welcome something. I mean, I really think that's splitting hairs on it. My test, I know, Dan, is right simple. If you'd have woke up on Wednesday morning and bloody McCain had won, how would you have felt? And if you say you wouldn't have cared 2 hoots, but I think you're wrong, I would have been gutted. And I was glad that Obama won. And then it seems to me to be the other way, the question then comes, what do you say about it? Because I'm just like running this film properly, I don't really believe that Obama is going to deliver the change that people want and desperately need. I don't believe it. You have to be careful, you know, because it seems to me even around the questions of some of these things, FDR wasn't FDR until he began to be pressurised by the American trade union and carried out a number of things. He wasn't a socialist by any measure. But he did carry out a number of programmatical changes to the American Constitution which enabled workers to gain rights and give confidence to workers to fight back. I don't know whether Obama will do those things. No one does, right? The question to me, it seems to be, we have to be saying things with it. When you have such vast support for someone, we have to be explaining to people what's going wrong. It seems to me there's a couple of things. I think we say, Who voted for Obama so that he can now start employing people into his government who are right-wing Republicans who support the Israeli Defence Force? We didn't vote for this. I think that's an obvious thing. We didn't vote for Obama to go and surge in Afghanistan. We voted really out of Afghanistan. We have to tactically find a way of both understanding where people are coming from and winning them closer to our ideas. And I think we don't do that, we never will. On the question of anti-capitalism, very, very simple. We never argued that the bloody Seattle was more important than the miners' strike or anything like it. We have to understand about where we come from the anti-capitalism. I think you're to be absolutely right, by the way, was that after a period of 10 years where very little moved in the 1990s around the question, what Seattle was a wake-up call. Is exactly what we called it, a wake-up call for the movement. And it wasn't just middle-class kids. Seattle was the Turtles with the Teamsters, if I remember rightly, going back to 1999. It was the coming together of trade unionists and of anti-capitalist kids, and I think that was a big way for the big problem was 9/11. That's what brought that movement down. That's what disarmed that movement and carried on. For me, it was the beginnings where you could begin to open up the question of opposing globalisation, of the negative aspects of globalisation, and begin to put forward a different world and money. And anyone who thinks that was just rubbish, I just think missed out on the beginning. I'm glad you did it. I'll tell you one reason why I think you did. Look at the American left. The American left was very divided over the anti-capitalism, including our own organisation in America. I didn't believe it was a serious problem. Ask yourself one question now. Who is leading the anti-war movement, the anti-repossession movement in America right now? It's a small bunch of bloody Maoists. Now, I'm assuming that all of us agree in this room that Trotsky's, much better the Trotskyists were beginning to push this agenda forward. Why didn't they? Because they didn't grasp the questions that came out both from the anti-capitalist movement and the anti-war movement and missed out. It seems to me if you make mistakes like that, you can pay a heavy price. Two last points is this. I've said we've made mistakes, and I said, are you going to say you'll never make mistakes again? No, I ain't ever going to say that, because I don't believe if we get involved in things, we won't make mistakes again. I do fundamentally disagree on the question of Labour. I don't believe, of course it's massively weakened, I still think it has connections, however much weaker than we were 10 years ago, still has connections with the working class, and therefore it's a contradictory force, and we have to both understand that. But I do want to say this, none of you have come up and said, you've made mistakes. And is that not true either? And I'd like to hear that, because actually it's a two-way process goes on. I'm going to sit there and go through the mistakes I think you guys have made. Don't think that gets us anywhere. The point of argument is to argue where you're going, clarify it, and try and move forward. The last point I want to ask you something on their palaces. Alan. Two questions, sorry. Alan on the UAF. Look, United Against Fascism is a coming together of people in the Labour Party, outside the Labour Party, from the revolution left, from the anarchists, from the Greens and everything. And therefore, you cannot have a slogan of voting for anybody inside that, because if you say vote Labour or don't vote Labour, you cut off immediately everybody who doesn't agree with that position. Therefore, we have a position out there to hold it together, which is, it says vote to keep the Nazis out. It seems to be perfectly acceptable. It seems to be vote to keep the Nazis out can be used by anybody. If you're in the Socialist Party, in Lewisham or Coventry or anywhere else you're standing, keep the Nazis out, vote to keep them out means come on, vote for who you think is right to do so. The key question for me is not how you vote. The key question for me is creating a big enough movement inside the trade unions, inside our communities, to begin to undermine them and begin to break their in the back of it. And that then poses the question, can the left then build an alternative to the BNP? Because we cannot just keep saying, don't vote Nazi, because the question is that's not enough, and they're growing, and we have to break their back. And so therefore, for me, you have to be clear when you're United Front. You have one demand that unites everybody. You can't start putting other bits in that makes it impossible. And I think that's the spirit of what Trotsky did. Very last point was Alice. What do we do to keep going? And what are our mistakes and all that stuff? How do we stop this happening? On the question of dialogue, I put it this way: we have to carry on. We have to keep meeting, keep talking and arguing our things. You ain't going to agree with us on some things. We ain't going to agree your numbers. You think we cut you out? Well, trust me. In our caucuses, our members moan about you lot, right? Let's all be honest, we all know that goes on. There's no fucking about that. Our PCS goes, Jenny's good, she cuts us out. And I just say, I'm not interested in that kind of thing. You have to make your fight, and you have to fight with inside of it, and you have to do that. That's true of all of us. We have to be mature about that, and of course, we have to fight for the most democratic structures. But our members will say exactly the same thing if we had a meeting in here at our marks than you did. So, my argument is we've got to grow up, we've got to try and find ways of talking and doing it. And at the same time, we do disagree on fundamental questions, and we can't get skipped around that. On the question of we group, I will just say this one thing. I personally believe But around the question of regroupment, what will happen next time round, and I believe there will be a next time, is that it will be wider than the last time. In which case I believe there will be more trade union leaders involved in it, and I think there's a possibility McDonald's and maybe one or two other key people might come around it, plus other bits and pieces that are like. That's my personal opinion. We'll find out. I mean, don't quote me next year if I come back and say, well, you were wrong about that. That may be true, I may be wrong, but I think that's very, very, very likely to go. I'll tell you what we have to do, and I think we have to be honest with you, because you get border formations, sometimes we have to work together in order to fight. I hope there's a bigger forces. It's actually much better for the revolutionary left to be with it. I'd rather be the minority fighting the majority than I would be the running out of thing. Because if we're the minority, it's much bigger and all the rest of it. In that situation, we have to be quite honest amongst ourselves and in this room, and in our rooms, and in our SWP meetings, and think about it, what we're going to do. Are we going to fight for a revolutionary current? In that case, in that situation, we probably need to work together a little bit more. And some of you may not agree with that, but I think that will be inevitable. If we're really going to progress the question of fighting for the question of socialism at some point, there is going to be the question of all the revolutionary left coming together. Whether we like that or not, whether you think that's horrific, the idea of me being in the same room with you guys, you find that horrible, I might sit there thinking, oh my God, look at these people I've known from years ago in the PCS, I have the idea of fucking sitting with them, I can't bear it. The truth of it is, that will happen. Whether we like it or if it doesn't, it's because of the sectarianism. We'll all be fighting. And we may split again, we may come back together. Read the history of the Bolsheviks, of the bloody, of the German revolutionaries. I don't fear that, I welcome that, because that's a possibility of massive the revolutionary left. And in that situation, we have to understand the revolutionary left against the reformist left always, and amongst ourselves we have to fight ourselves. We're in for different times now, and different times involves all of us revising what we thought, where we go from. And that for me is exciting. Not something I fear at all, and I welcome that possibility, because for me that's one step closer to where we all want to be.
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to ask Hannah to reply.
Okay, I'll try and stick to time so you get some time to eat for the next set of sessions. At the beginning of his introduction, then Martin said it would be unfair to suggest that the SWP are not active. And I don't think any of us would suggest that the SWP are not active. We meet them on demonstrations all the time, on anti-war demonstrations, different activities and so on. But however hard the SWP work, of course, if that's on a wrong basis, there's a possibility that that activity is wasted or even counterproductive. And so the ideas, the politics that we've been discussing here today are important. And I hope that they will continue. It's very good. I was pleased that Martin recognised the role of Dave Nellis and our other councillors. I would say that they've never been invited to speak at Marxism, while all kinds of other people on the left are invited to speak at Marxism. And we, in fact, are very open. I think you can see by this debate today, we've bent over backwards to find people in the room who are not in the Socialist Party to speak in this discussion, to try and make sure that it is balanced. If there had been SWP members there, we would have been very happy to call them from the floor. So I hope that one way we can progress is that representatives of our party get an opportunity to continue these debates at Marxism. Now, on the different points that have been raised, the question of optimism. All revolutionaries must be optimistic. No question about that. However, we also have to be scientific. We have to be founded on reality. And when Martin said, well, maybe Cliff was right after all about the 1930s in slow motion, because of what's coming in the future, well, it's true, as we have long predicted, there is a major crisis taking place in capitalism, which is absolutely not just of the finance system, but it's a fundamental crisis of capitalism that's taking place. And out of that, over the coming years, we will see revolution and counter-revolutionary movements, not immediately, but over the next decade or so. But that's the future, not the 1990s, which were a very difficult time, as I think was described actually by Martin when he spoke, for revolutionaries. And so it does matter that you differentiate whether you're living in a positive period, a period where the working class can make gains, or whether you're in a more difficult period. Now, I think there's been a lot of points raised in the discussion. At the beginning of his introduction, Martin made a number of points which we would probably all agree with. On the question of the economic crisis, also on the question of a rising tide of struggle, even before the current crisis, yes, from a low level, but there has been an increase in the number of strikes. And there is enormous anger from below. The only reason the number of strikes hasn't been higher, as we all know, is because that has been held back by the right-wing trade union bureaucracy, the majority actually of the national trade union leaders. And they are now using the excuse of recession to try and say, well, workers can't fight because they're worried about their jobs, so they can't fight on pay and on other issues. Now, that is a fear of workers, but we don't accept that that means that you can't fight on pay. Far from it. After all, we're all going into this winter with less money in our pockets as a result of the inflation, particularly in basic goods, that has taken place. However, the PCS have not gone ahead with the strike action on Monday because they don't think you can fight on the issue of wages at the moment, or because they didn't think the majority for strike action was big enough. That's the NUT, which is a different issue. We would probably agree with how the SWP members voted on the NUT executive, that strike action should go ahead. The PCS was a question that management had been brought, as was described by the speaker who spoke from the floor, to the negotiating table with the threat of strike action hanging over their head, and it's still hanging there, and that was a concession by them, and you then had to follow that through. Your members would not understand if you just didn't go ahead, if you just refused to negotiate and went ahead with a strike when management was saying, no, we want to negotiate. And in fact, you'd lose the leadership of the union as a left-fighting leadership if you proceeded on that kind of reckless basis. So we don't agree on that point. Now, on the question of political representation and this issue of a new mass party, why does it matter to discuss, I think the SLP got thrown into the pot as well, the SLP, the Socialist Alliance, Respect? It matters exactly because the previous failures have been obstacles on the road to a new mass party. And we agree with what Martin said. There are no guarantees here that this economic crisis will be won by the left, that we will be the gainers from it. There is a danger that it could be the far right, the BNP, that make gains, especially in the initial periods. And the absence of a workers' party, a mass workers' party, makes that more likely. So we have to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes that were made in the past. The mistakes that were made in the SLP, which was extremely top-down, in the Socialist Alliance, when it was taken over by the Socialist Workers' Party. And I have every sympathy with Toby Absey's points. There are other independents in the Socialist Alliance who begged us, please stay and protect us from the SWP. But unfortunately, as was shown by that conference, they were using their greater numerical strength at that point in time in order to bludgeon through a constitution, as Judy described, which took away all independent right to organise for other organisations. And we were not able, we tried with our best to win the vote, we were not able to prevent that. And in that instance, we had no choice but to leave. Now, on the question of Respect, I think there's no doubt that Respect, from its early stages, made too many opportunist political concessions in order to try and get an electoral base. And there were, I mean, we can produce the leaflets and so on that said the party for Muslims in the 2004 Euro elections and all the rest of it. Now, later on, the SWP raised some of those criticisms about the behaviour of Galloway. But in our opinion, at the beginning, they didn't raise any of those criticisms. In fact, they attacked the rest of us for daring to mention that this might be a mistake, because at that stage, they were in a block with Galloway, and it is a wrong approach. See, the question of the workers' wage, which Martin raised, we accept that there'll be situations where you're in a broader party with individuals who've got weight in the movement, who are important to win to that party, but are not prepared to accept a worker's wage. And there can be instances where you want to keep them on board, and you don't force that position through, but you make absolutely clear that the general position of the party is to stand for a worker's wage, and that all of your people are going to stand for a worker's wage. You argue the case for it. Now, that is not what took place in Respect, because there was a fear of upsetting Galloway. It was all behind closed doors rather than an open discussion that took place in front of the membership. Now, just on the question of United Against Fascism, I think that has really been dealt with. We agree with the point that's made that it's not enough to call for a vote for Labour, because many of the workers who are angry with Labour, well, that's why they're voting for the BNP, because of their disillusionment with the Labour Party. So we agree on that. The trouble with Unite Against Fascism is if you have a position where you're sitting on platforms with Labour and Tory councillors in different areas, and all you're saying is vote for anyone but the BNP, well, that is not going to help to win over those disillusioned voters. And so there is a problem. And as far as we can see, it's not a United Front where the SWP put their position position, and the Labour councillors put theirs. Whether you call that a united front is a bit of a dubious issue, but that's not the case, and in fact Martin described that. It's the position of the SWP keeping their mouths shut and therefore not putting forward an effective political programme because they're trapped within Unite Against Fascism. Now, just on the question of the Labour Party, there is a disagreement here, and we know this, Martin has said so, on the nature of the Labour Party today. Of course, there are workers who are still loyal to the Labour Party, particularly a layer of older workers in the trade union movement whose attitude is, we will vote Labour until we die because it used to be our party. That's always the case, that you get a kind of historical inertia that exists among sections of workers. But that doesn't mean that you can describe the Labour Party as in any sense being a workers' party. It's lost 5 million votes since 1997. Those votes, as Martin described, are overwhelmingly in the working class parts of the country. Its membership, as he again described, has plummeted. And the trade unions, while they're still affiliated, have absolutely no power. The structures have been destroyed to influence the policies of the Labour Party. And therefore we do think it's right to call for disaffiliation, and that the position for just democratising the funds that's put forward by the Socialist Workers' Party is a mistake. And it's our experience that as soon as workers are involved in struggle, they then themselves start demanding disaffiliation. I mean, that's where the FBU, which our members moved from Northern Ireland at the FBU conference, that's where it came from. The membership were furious with the Labour Party and they weren't prepared to give them another penny. Now, I need to move on to other points. I just want to deal with the question of the future for the Labour parties. I may have got this wrong, but I thought there was a hint in what Martin was saying, that he thought that maybe Labour might still shift back to the left, perhaps after the general election. He didn't say that, that's a guess on my part. I must say, Labour being forced to step in and nationalise the banks does not indicate that in any way, part nationalise some banks, in any way whatsoever. After all, George Bush has had to do some quite similar things. I think all you need to say to any workers, well, they brought Mandelson into the cabinet at the same time as they did it, to give an indication of where Labour is at. If you look at other countries, look at Greece, or Germany, France, other countries, it does not follow that social democratic parties move back to the left after they are kicked out of power. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't be forced to carry out further Keynesian measures, including even under mass pressure, being forced to step in and take over car plants and so on. That could happen. No question about that. And we agree that's important. The main reason it's important for us, yeah, we do want to debate with the Larry Elliots and co, but the main reason it's important for us is because it raises in the minds of ordinary workers. You can intervene in the economy to save capitalism. Why can't you intervene for us? Better than that, why can't we run our factory? Why can't we take it over? And so it raises the question of genuine socialist nationalisation in the consciousness of the working class. Very last points. On the question of a new party and of regroupment, of revolutionary regroupment. We think we will see a mass party in Britain. One of the reasons it's been delayed, in our opinion, is partly because some of the left trade union leaders, the John McDonnells and the rest of them, were a little bit cautious about being in a party with the Socialist Party, and maybe they're holding back a little bit. But they can see the need for such a party, and it will come into existence. It may well involve, who knows, beyond the general election, John McDonnell, different left trade union leaders. That's not what's most important for us. The issue for us is that it involves a fresh layer of the working class, that they themselves enter struggle, see that they need a political alternative, and it will be them that found a new party. And that really is what makes it a positive development for us, whether or not it involves trade union and current Labour MPs in it. Now, within that, once we have a revolutionary regroupment, we do not have a position that it's the Socialist Party alone and we're not prepared to discuss with other revolutionaries. On the contrary, at the start of the 1990s, at the time of the collapse of Stalinism, our international systematically discussed with all the different internationals around the world on the possibilities of revolutionary regroupment. We found at that time, in most cases, well, on an international basis, the differences were too great. In some cases, a kind of denying of reality, the 1990s is fantastic, we're going to see revolution. In most cases, a capitulation, actually, to the huge pressures that came from capitalism at that time and an abandonment of revolutionary policies. The SWP were in the former camp at that point in time. Since then, In different parts of the world, in Brazil, for example, we're discussing with other revolutionaries about coming together and trying to find agreement. You don't have to get agreement on every dot and comma, but if you don't get agreement on the fundamentals of how you build a party, you will end up with 50 organisations where you started with 2 or 3 that came together. So I won't rule anything out. But on the basis of the differences between us and the SWP that exist at the moment, I think it's quite a long way to go before you would see us in one revolutionary organisation. That would require, in our opinion, a fundamental reassessment by the Socialist Workers' Party, which of course we would welcome. And we did welcome Martin saying today the points he made about realignment, working together and so on. However, we would like to see some evidence on the ground. I do have to say, the very comradely tones, the criticisms of the PCS, we don't agree, but they were done in a fair and comradely fashion here today. But that is not what is repeated in our experience of your party day to day. Particularly not being allowed to put our point of view. I mean, we fought might and main for a united front against the witch hunt that's taking place in Unison, which both of our parties are suffering under. Under pressure, a joint conference has been agreed, and at this stage, the SWP will not even let Glenn Kelly in the platform on it. The student world left that's been set up, that no other forces outside of the Socialist Workers' Party, in terms of student activists, were able to speak on the platform, and yet Klinikos can come and speak to those students. So our experience on the ground is not of openness, of a toing and froing. We'd like that to change. I'm not saying that about the debate today, but we would like to see some evidence in practice of more willingness to work alongside others. I think I'll leave it.